What's up, everybody? Welcome to Last Takes 2020 Knicks offseason preview episode. We're going to take you guys through how we think the Knicks offseason should go. I have a very special guest with me. One of the better follows you could have on Twitter, at NYSportsFanCush. You could probably see him teaching me pretty much anything when it comes to Knicks, Giants, Yankees, about analytics. One of the smarter people you'll interact with on there, also one of the nicest. Pumped to have him on. So, Ethan, let's start it off. We actually have talked about this for the past 5 minutes, and I'm an idiot that forgot to start recording. So we'll go through it again real quick. Been in the news the past couple days, all over Twitter. Rumors are Russ wants out of Houston. The Knicks could potentially be interested in his services. What's your opinion on a potential Russ to the Knicks trade? How do you see it going down if it does, and whether it's something you would want to happen?
All right, so first off, whether I'd want it to happen. So I guess no. As I said when we were talking before, no, not really. This would be very much a rushed move. It would be a very Knicks, I described it a Knicksy move. Like it would just be a move that is a stereotypical move, just going after the biggest name available, especially in a free agency class in general that's doesn't really have any huge names. It would be typical to just go after this star on this giant contract that isn't good. I believe in a few years, I'll pull up his exact contract, but in a few years there's gonna be he has a player option that I'd assume he'd probably pick up at this point in his career. That's for $46 million.
Yeah.
It would just be such a move, and plus it's just in 2020 he just doesn't provide he just in his prime, obviously, when he was more efficient, and he was just and obviously he's had some injuries in the past that he's not as explosive, I guess you can say, as he used to be. But just in the years past, he was just he's starting to he's not what he once was anymore. Especially in his MVP season. His MVP season, he had even for a guy who's stereotyped as being this inefficient superstar, he was still above average efficiency and stuff. But that's gone downhill. He shot 25% from three last year. He's just there's just a lot. He messes up your spacing and stuff nowadays. There's not too much he provides. I shouldn't say not a lot he provides good to your team, but just I feel for the Knicks, a team that is trying to develop young players, it won't be a good experience for RJ or even Mitch playing with a guy like Russ who's very ball dominant. It really doesn't matter who's on his team. This year from 2018 to 2019, he had a 31% usage rate. And this year, it actually went up 5%, playing with James Harden, one of the more ball-dominant superstars in the league. It actually went up. So he's shown, which rightfully so, in years past, he's been a great player for a long time. But he would just want he might start he not only do I think he doesn't really have any room when it comes to developing players. I think he would hold us back. He might even hold them back because he'll want the ball. He won't improve our spacing by any means. And I think obviously this gets brought up because I think mostly because we're the Knicks. This is a typical move that we'd make. We have James Dolan as our owner. He's a type of owner that would push for something like this. That would push for something that would sell jerseys, because he'd sell jerseys. He'd be one of the biggest names the Knicks have, just name-wise, one of the biggest players that we've really ever had. I'm not saying but he'd be one of. So he'd sell jerseys. People would watch him because he'd be fun to watch. He'd take every shot every game, and we'd lose by 30, but it would be fun to see him play, I guess. But in general, really the only good thing he provides is we'll win a few more games and we'll get worse lottery odds / maybe we get an 8 seed one year and just get crushed by the Bucks or something. But yeah, so I think that's why it obviously gets brought up as a possibility when you have James Dolan as your owner. He'd definitely increase revenue short term. So it would, but in general, I think we're in a position where we can't just like throw away where we can't just like we're not in a position where we're just like completely have just no talent where we can just like throw away a few years to watch Russ. Like we do have some talent, so I don't think this would be a good move at all.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely spot on with everything. I personally don't want Russ. You're totally right. He would be, the biggest superstar to come to the Knicks probably in the 21st century. I mean, you can argue that maybe the Carmelo trade 10 years ago would have a little bit more juice to it, just with the fact that the Knicks already had a pretty decent team around him at that point. And it was kind of like a homecoming kind of thing. So that was definitely exciting. But at the same time, that move, you look at what the Knicks gave up, what they ended up getting out of it. They won one playoff series. And I don't know. It's tough because they're different kinds of players. I would say Carmelo Anthony at that stage of his career was probably a better player than Russell Westbrook is now. And that's debatable. But I think that one thing you could say about both of them, Melo then, Russ now, is that he's not one of the handful of guys that you could put on a bad team and they'll go to the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? Like LeBron James, at least for most of his career, was the kind of guy where you put him on a team, no matter what, that team was going to the playoffs. They might not win a championship, but that team is going to the playoffs. That team's going to win 50 games guaranteed. Russell Westbrook is not that kind of guy. Like the Knicks aren't bringing in that kind of guy. No one that is that caliber of player wants to play here yet. So I know you and I talked about this yesterday, and it's something that people have alluded to, and I hate to say it, but the Knicks really kind of need to follow the Brooklyn Nets model in my mind, which is, they made that awful trade for KG and Pierce, mortgaged their future that people thought was going to, haunt them for years. And they really made a quick recovery by just building up talent, young talent. It was a lot of it in part to D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, these guys making the playoffs, and that's what made it an attractive enough place for KD and Kyrie to sign there. Does that work out? I don't know, but they have a much better championship now than they did 5 years ago. So I think the Knicks need to try and do something similar where you're right, they need RJ and Mitch to get minutes and play and not be, not take second responsibility or second priority to a guy like Westbrook. Like I'm pulling up your tweet. This was from May. So you tweeted, amount of minutes RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson played together, 618. Amount of minutes Kevin Knox and Bobby Portis played together, 752. I mean, that's disgusting. Like, what are we – the last year of the Knicks, watching them made no sense to me because if you're going to suck, which they clearly were, there was no combination of guys that were going to make them a playoff team or anything close to it. Why would you not suck with your young guys, get experience, see what you have, like – throwing out like the Bobby Portises, the Wayne Ellingtons, and it's not. Listen, I don't have anything against those guys. Like I actually liked Bobby Portis, but like, there's no point in watching these veterans lose and having our young guys sit the bench or not play as much as they should. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's the number one thing that the Knicks need to do, and what a Westbrook trade would really hold them back from is they need to let the young guys cook because either they need to get experience and hopefully improve to the point that we can, become competitive, or we need to figure out who stays and who goes, because at a certain point, we have a lot of young guys now. They're not all going to stay in all likelihood, so we got to figure out what we have with RJ, with Mitch, with Knox, Frank. We need those guys to play. I don't want them sitting behind veterans, and I especially don't want a guy like Westbrook coming in. Yeah, maybe we'll win an extra 10 games. What's it really going to do for us?
Yeah, and also a common saying is just always like the worst place to be in the NBA is just like in the middle. And that's kind of what Russ would cause. We'd be like a late lottery, like we'd be like competing for the playoffs sort of throughout the year, but then we'd like fall out and we'd get like the 12th best odds in the lottery and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like that's just not where you want to be. And then like even like you look at like a potential CP3 trade. CP3 at least he brings like we've seen this past year for one, like just how much a bunch of the players on the Thunder have grown with playing with him. And like in general, it would be more like with CP3, like I would think of it as like with Russ, we'd be somewhat competing for the playoffs. I don't even know if we'd make the playoffs with Russ. Like if we'd truly be competing, I guess is what I meant to say. It would just be because he just controlled the ball the entire time and just took like every shot the entire game. With CP3, it would be a little bit more of just like we'd compete for the 8th seed based off like other players like growing a little bit, and obviously him having a big contribution. So I think a trade like that would make a little bit more sense. Just makes I should say a lot more sense. You could argue like whether you think we should make that trade. For one, it might be more expensive to make that trade, and like maybe you just don't think the idea of going really win like in a win now mode at all right now is a good idea. But I think a trade like that would make more sense than in theory just like bringing in Russ and like you're just kind of selling your soul to Russ at that point. Like you're basically just like giving up all hope and just saying like, Russ, like, just do whatever the hell you want kind of thing.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I mean, I think the outcome, if they did end up trading for a CP3, which I think at this point is out of the question, it seems like him to the Suns almost seems like a done deal at this point in time. But I mean, look what he did for the Thunder last year. I mean, no one expected that team to compete. And granted, the Thunder did have more talent around him than the Knicks would at this very moment put around him. But just look what he did, uplifting that team, was a really good influence for those guys, really made everyone around him better. I don't think Russell Westbrook is really the kind of point guard that makes everyone around him better. Like to a degree he does, but I hate to say this because it's such a cliche, but I think it's kind of true in that, he's this like triple double machine and like he is, but at a certain point, like some of those stats are kind of empty. Like I think Russ is like an elite athlete and like I think obviously a great player. The guy's a former MVP, but I don't think he's the kind of guy you bring in and instantly everyone around him is this better player. Like I just don't see that happening with the Knicks. So I really don't think a Westbrook trade makes any sense unless, like you said, it's James Dolan trying to, excite the fan base for the first time in the past 7 years by bringing in a guy with a name to him, and he's going to sell jerseys. And the thing that sucks too, the Garden is always going to sell out. Like that's why Dolan will never feel urgency. It's in the middle of Manhattan. Like it's always going to sell out. I went to one Knicks game last year. We were sitting next to this guy from England, and it's like, yeah, anyone that visits New York, they're going to come to they'll come to the Garden, go to a Knicks game. So no matter how bad they are, he'll never feel the pressure to actually make the team good because the Garden will sell out every night regardless.
Yeah. And as you said, like, even though like I often like make fun of people who say like, oh, they're just like empty, because like oftentimes it'll just be like this young player who puts up like insane scoring numbers with like very good efficiency, but just be on a bad team and they'll lose games, and people will be like, oh, empty stats, and I don't think that's fair. But at the same time, for one, Russell Westbrook has never been like, he's always been a guy with a high usage rate. He's led the league like twice in usage rate. And he's never been like overly efficient. Like his highest, like I'll check his highest true shooting percentage plus, which is essentially like just over 100 of above average, was in 2015 to 2016 of 102. So he's just never been overly efficient. In like his prime years, he was pretty averagely efficient. And the last 3 years he's been pretty inefficient, to be honest. So, and as you said, like he's just not a guy that just yeah, he contributes to the team, but it's on his own. Like he doesn't make like the players around him better kind of thing.
Exactly. So moving on from Russ, we're both clearly very against that. Hopefully the Knicks don't make, like you said, a Knicksy move and trade, first round draft picks and young talent for him. We'll see. I'm hoping that now that I know Phil Jackson's been gone, that disaster's over. Hopefully Leon Rose can make some good moves. And I know that Tom Thibodeau probably will play our young guys like 45 minutes a game. So At least we'll get to see them play a little bit more. So we'll start with the draft. The Knicks pick 8th. We're talking about this a little bit yesterday too. Where do you see them going as far as, do they stay at 8 and pick someone there? Do they trade back? Do they trade up? What do you think they do? What would you like to see them do? What kind of guys do you see the Knicks targeting in the draft?
So really, the only prospect I really see us potentially trading up for, which we'd have to trade to like 2 with the Warriors, would be like LaMelo. That's really the only prospect that's like a top of the end prospect that you've really heard the Knicks being like really enamored with, to the point where you really think they might trade up. The thing is, at 8, it kind of depends. It's kind of interesting because at 8, like last year when we were picking at 3, we kind of knew Zion would go 1. We kind of knew Ja would go 2. And then the entire fan base was begging to take RJ at 3. And then, like, of course, of course, people got nervous because, like, you heard them, like, they were like, oh, we're interviewing Darius Garland. We're interviewing Jarrett Culver. So, of course, people got nervous because, like, but I think they were just doing their due diligence, and RJ was their guy all along. But the thing is, at 8, there's just so much, and especially in this draft, there's just so much that can, like, happen. And, like, there's guys that can fall. Like, I think Killian Hayes is a guy who I really like. I think he's literally one of the best players in this draft. Typically projected to go higher than 8, but, like, is a guy that could easily still fall to 8. Like, a lot of mock drafts have him going, like, 7 to the Pistons. You know, like, if like that happens in the Pistons, like, maybe they turn out to not like him for whatever reason. He just falls one spot, so that could happen. Isaac Okoro from Auburn. Killian Hayes is from he's from France, but I believe he played in the German league last year. But Isaac Okoro from Auburn, you know, he's solid. He's a guy that's been mocked a lot to the Knicks, but he's also been mocked a lot to go a little bit before us. I've personally grown a little bit attached to Tyrese Maxey. It might be a little bit of a reach at 8, but I think there's some star potential there. Like, I think there's a little bit of a Donovan Mitchell-esque kind of thing with him that I like. His big struggle is he shot like 30% from 3 last year in college, but like his free throw percentage was pretty solid. So he's a guy that, like, maybe he shoots from 3 a little bit more consistently. Like, he's probably never going to be a plus 3-point shooter, but he's efficient from everywhere else pretty much. So he's like a guy that I think there's a little bit of a Donovan Mitchell kind of thing where I think there's some stuff, like, there's some real star potential. Devin Vassal's a guy that's been brought up a lot, really good 3-point shooter. So he'd make a lot of roster fit because we need guys who can shoot. So but while I like Devin Vassell, I think he'd be a good pick. Nor do I think we're at a position where, like, obviously if the Knicks think Devin Vassell's a really good player, which I would completely understand them thinking that, but I don't think we're at a position where through the draft we can draft players solely based on, like, how good they fit. I think they kind of got to go unless it's a player that's just an atrocious fit, like let's just say like a big I don't know, like, just someone who's just, like, not a good fit at all. Like, I just don't think that they can really, like, pass on, like, a player that they think is really talented for a guy who's just a little bit of a better fit. You can get your fits, you can get guys who can shoot in free agency. Like, if you think that a certain player is better than another, like, you got to take him in our position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. The Knicks are definitely not in the position to be drafting based on need. You know, you look at this roster and, you know, there's definitely some promise there, but I would think that the only 2 guys that anyone would be hell-bent on keeping at this point are RJ and Mitch. I think everything else is pretty flexible, so definitely got to draft the best guy on the board. You know, I do agree with you. I definitely like Hayes a lot. You know, I was looking at CBS Sports mock draft earlier. They have him going the pick before us. They have us taking Okoro out of Auburn. So I would definitely like him. Another guy you brought up when we were talking last night who, you know, could potentially go before our pick as well, Tyrese Halliburton, the point guard out of Iowa State. Another guy that could shoot, I think would make a good pairing with RJ. I personally, you know, like you said, it's they need to take whoever they feel is the best player available, and hopefully they're right. Hopefully it's not the same situation as a couple years ago where they passed up on a Donovan Mitchell, you know, to take Frank. As much as I do like Frank, I think Frank is a great defender, but he's not the caliber of player that's going to uplift your franchise. You know, I firmly believe if the Knicks don't hold on to him, he's going to go to, like, the Spurs and be an important rotation player, you know, in like a 3-peat or something. But so I don't know. I do think that, you know, I love RJ. I know you're very high on RJ. I was desperately hoping they wouldn't mess up that draft pick last year, and they didn't. I think he got a lot of unnecessary hate, people being hard on him. I think a lot of that comes just because he's on the Knicks and people love to clown the Knicks, and because, you know, because he didn't have, like, the best rookie season ever, everyone's trashing him. But I thought, you know, I really liked what I saw from him last year. I do think one thing that they're going to have to keep in mind, RJ is not someone to me that's going to be a primary ball handler, and he's not someone that's going to ever light it up from beyond the arc. Like, he could shoot a little bit, but I don't think he's going to be like the number one option as far as, someone you want to take a lot of threes. So I would like them to get in the draft, and obviously this is asking a lot, but someone who could be their primary ball handler and someone who is a good shooter. So hopefully, maybe it's Hayes, maybe it's Halliburton, maybe it's someone else. Those are the two requirements that I want them to look for, and that's what I'm thinking that they'll probably target going into the draft.
Yeah. So I think also touching on the RJ point, I think to some degree, there was some like you could like poke holes in him a little bit, but I felt like some of it was definitely unfair. Like it's just like, and especially later in the year, he improved a lot later in the year. For one, he obviously there was the injury he was coming off of, and then like he struggled a little bit coming off the injury, but like he, late in the year, like you can look at like his stats like post All-Star break and stuff. He did improve a lot, and like I think people can poke holes, like he wasn't efficient and stuff, which like I think a lot of people like nowadays like that's which I do as well. But I think that will improve. Like I think for one he'll improve his jump shot a bit. You've seen like for one he's like which like I don't think he's ever going to be like an elite 3-point shooter or anything. But I just think he'll improve like a little bit. He's like a hardworking guy, and like he's now had like 10 months to improve it, which I think he spent a lot. Like that's been a big concern. Like he's worked out. Forget his name, but he's a guy. So he's been working. I forget his ad on like Twitter is like lethal shooter. He's like one of the more famous shooting coaches. He worked with like Jason Tatum. And a bunch of other dudes who were like really talented, but just like needed a little bit of like shooting help, I guess, a little. Apparently he's been on like podcasts as well, describing about like how he's like helped RJ. So I think like, well, he's probably not going to be an elite shooter. If he can just get it up a little bit, he could be like a really solid player who's like a secondary playmaker. He'll be a really solid scorer. He'll be a guy who can defend the 1 through 3. So yeah, I'm really high on him. I think he's going to be a really he probably won't be like a superstar. He's going to be a really good player, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So that's the draft. Let's finish up with, what do you see the Knicks starting lineup shaping up to be next year? I think we could both agree Mitch and RJ definitely should be in the starting lineup. I think we can probably also unfortunately agree that Julius Randle will probably be in the starting lineup. Would you agree with me on that or no?
I mean, I think there's a chance he might get traded, but as the roster is constructed now, he's probably in the starting lineup. Yes.
You're blocked by Julius Randle on Twitter, are you not?
Yes, I am blocked.
How did you get blocked by him?
People have commented way worse things. I just commented, please request a trade. He blocks me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he blocks me because I said, please request a trade.
So just for argument's sake here, how do you see the Knicks filling out their starting lineup aside from RJ and Mitch in your eyes?
So it probably also depends a little on what we do in the draft. Like, let's just say in theory, we draft Isaac Okoro and we don't have a point guard. I think there's probably a better chance that we go after like a Fred VanVleet in free agency. But if we draft like, let's say Killian Hayes, like I don't know if they go or like if we draft Killian Hayes for one, like we were talking about, there might be less need to go after like some star point guard, I guess. Like, but if we go after but if we draft someone else, like maybe we sign Fred VanVleet. So I think a big priority for one. So obviously we have Julius Randle, but as we said before, he's just like a pretty bad roster fit. He can't shoot. He's a horrible fit with RJ and Mitch, which are like at the moment 2 cornerstones. So I think we should go after like a stretch big like a Davis Bertans, who's or a Christian Wood, who both those guys are a little younger, so they might command a little bit more long term. But that, again, them being younger is also a good point. Or like even Danilo Gallinari, who's obviously been here, he's been in New York. He's a better player than he was in New York the first time. He's a little older, so he might be looking to cash out on like a 1 year, pretty expensive deal. But if it's a 1 year deal, there's really nothing to worry about. So you give him he's coming off a really good last 2 seasons, really two of the best in his career the last 2 seasons on 2 different teams now, both of which were young fringe playoff young people didn't really see coming, but they both ended up making the playoffs. Obviously he's a really good 3-point shooter. The last 2 years, as I've mentioned, he shot over 40% the last 2 years, which have been 2 of his best seasons of his career. I think he'd be a good fit if the Knicks don't want to commit long term to anyone, just because he'd be able to space the floor, and he'd just be a good player who's been able to fit in with 2 relatively young teams the last 2 years. So I think he'd be a good fit. As I said, Christian Wood, he might cost less per annual value, but he'd probably want more years. He's a little younger. Breakout player for the Pistons this year, kind of came out of nowhere. He was cut by I think the Sixers and the Pelicans. Then the Pistons, he just kind of came out of nowhere. He was an undrafted player for the Sixers, and then they cut him, and the Pelicans can't cut him. Now he's one of the bigger free agents on the market. And then also kind of on the rush train. As long as we don't go after as long as we don't go after and sign DeMar DeRozan to a big deal, I think we'll be fine this offseason, because I think as long as we just get maybe we sign Justin Holiday, who could be a solid 3-and-D wing for us. As long as we don't go after DeMar DeRozan, give him a big contract. I wouldn't be surprised as well if the Knicks end up maxing out Brandon Ingram, but I think that gets matched by the Pelicans. He's a restricted free agent, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks try that. But I think that will just get matched by the Pelicans. So I don't see them doing too much, but I think they can make a few solid moves that would be really good. So
yeah. No, I totally agree with you. A lot of the names you threw around, it would definitely be open to a Gallinari reunion. Wood and Bertans are definitely 2 guys that could come in and help. I know yesterday you had mentioned Joe Harris as well as a potential target. I've liked a lot of what I've seen with him with the Nets. Is he a free agent, Joe Harris, or would that be?
He's a free agent, but I think he's going to re-sign. It's been clear from all the reports that their first priority this offseason is going to be re-signing him. So I don't see him leaving, but maybe it's one of those scenarios where you see the Nets not wanting to go too much, and then he starts negotiating with other teams. But I do think he'll re-sign. Yes.
Yeah, no, but yeah, totally agree with you. I think the one common factor in pretty much all the names you mentioned guys who can shoot, and I feel that's one thing the Knicks are always lacking is just a solid. I'm not even saying guys to score 25 points a game, just a solid play defense, knock down the 3-and-D guy. I feel we haven't had one of those in so long. So if they could go out and get any guy like that in that capacity, put him alongside RJ and Mitch, I think that would be definitely a solid starting point for a team that could be at least watchable in this upcoming season.
Yeah.
So.
I mentioned Fred VanVleet for one. If we don't, I know a lot of people are making fun of the Knicks a little bit because there's been some quote unquote rumors, because there's always these rumors that are Knicks tempted to max Fred VanVleet, and it's we're not actually gonna max Fred VanVleet.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you'll see Fred VanVleet he'll get a contract similar to Malcolm Brogdon last year. He's a good playmaker. He's a good defender. He can shoot. So if we don't end up not drafting a primary ball handling point guard type player, could see him being a guy. I mentioned Justin Holiday. He'd be pretty cheap. And he just provides some good 3-point shooting and defense. We saw it. He's very valuable to the Pacers last year and years prior. He's been a good, solid player. So, and I mentioned Gallo. Like, I know he's bad at defense, for lack of a better term, but like he can shoot. He's like a 20-point a game scorer, really efficient 20 points a game that can shoot really well. So like I think he'd be good as well.
Yeah, the thing about free agents being rumored to go to the Knicks is that any free agent or available via trade player that has a pulse is rumored to go to the Knicks. So you can only believe so much of what you hear. But so Ethan, I know you got to get going here in a couple minutes. So just any closing thoughts, remarks, anything, if James Dolan happens to stumble upon this video, anything you would want to tell him to do, anything, one specific thing you think the Knicks need, going into this offseason?
What I tell James Dolan to do, if you bring that up, is I just tell him, please just stay back. You've done all right this past year or so. Like you've gotten rid of like Steve Mills, David Fizdale. They were atrocious. You've brought in Leon Rose. He seems to know what he's doing. You've brought in Worldwide West. He seems to have all these crazy connections. We've brought in Tibbs. Like I far from perfect, but he's had like his experience. He's experienced and stuff. Like he's done all right. Like this past year, like just continue to just like let the people do what they know what to do and just like stay out of it. But anyway, so yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It was fun. I've rarely ever done stuff like this, so yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, no, Ethan, appreciate having you, buddy. This was awesome. Like I said, go follow him at NY Sports Fan Kush on Twitter. We'll be talking more Knicks. Watch us bug out if the Knicks trade for Westbrook. It'll be a good time, except for us, all Knicks fans involved. Like the video, subscribe, share on Twitter. Tell me I'm stupid, whatever you want to do. But Ethan, thanks for coming on, buddy. We'll do it again sometime.
Thank you.